Alright, let's just jump straight into this. Qantas, outsourced baggage handler says 1 in 10 bags not making flights at Sydney domestic terminal. And this is from the 11th of July 2022. As many as 1 in 10 pieces of luggage on average are either getting lost or not being loaded onto Qantas domestic flights each day at Sydney Airport, according to a baggage handler who works for the company that the carrier outsourced jobs to. Guardian Australia can separately reveal that Swissport, one of the main companies Qantas has outsourced the supply baggage handling service, has itself been forced to contract 2 separate labour hire firms to find workers for shifts that Qantas has contracted it to fill. Amid widespread staff shortages across ground handling and aviation businesses as the beleaguered sector struggles to cope with a return to pre-pandemic travel demand, attrition rates are soaring among new employees scared by chaotic scenes and poor conditions, with Swissport now offering a $50 a day bonus to baggage handlers at Sydney Airport simply for turning up to their shifts for the rest of the year. While global and local carriers have long relied on third-party contractors to fulfill ground handling services away from their hubs, Qantas and its budget carrier Jetstar's dominance in Australia have meant that the recent surge in lost luggage and its emergence as the airline with the worst on-time performance and cancellation rates in May have been significant contributors to the chaotic scenes at Australian airports this year. Qantas has suffered a shortage of baggage handlers since its 2020 decision to outsource about 1,700 jobs. That decision was found to be unlawful and in part motivated by anti-union sentiment, and the airline is now attempting to challenge that finding in the High Court. We'll get back to that. In an interview with Guardian Australia, one Swissport baggage handler in Sydney, who requested anonymity out of fear of retribution, raised concerns that those loading and transporting bags to and from Qantas and Jetstar flights were overworked, poorly paid, and unable to handle the increase in baggage in recent months as domestic travel has soared. The worker said that the roughly 100 barrows or trolleys seen by a typical baggage handler each day at Sydney domestic airport, these days there are about 10 barrows each day that just don't make it on. Each barrow carries 30 to 40 pieces of luggage. They said that during recent school holiday peaks, office managers from Qantas and Southport had to roll up their sleeves and help move luggage alongside handlers. However, there's still just not enough of us to get all the bags. Qantas declined to give its own figures on how many bags were mishandled, lost or otherwise did not make it onto the correct flight recently at Sydney domestic terminal, but a spokesperson said in a statement after this article was first published, such claims were completely inaccurate. Claims that 1 in 10 bags have been mishandled are wrong, they said. The rate of mishandled bags across the Qantas network over the past 4 weeks is less than 1%, and our teams are working hard to get that figure down further. Alright, I'm going to stop it right there, because if we just think about it for a moment, and if Sydney Airport would have tens of thousands of people travel through there each day, and if Qantas is fairly dominant and a lot of those people would have to use that airline, then even still, 1% is a lot of bags. Alright, we'll carry on. In recent months, Swissport has contracted labour hire firms Star Aviation and Workfast, the latter of which is not aviation specific, to fill the shortage in its teams working on Qantas and Jetstar operations. Training and processes differ depending on the airline, with the type of aircraft dictating how luggage is loaded. The Swissport worker who spoke to The Guardian said about 25% of his colleagues each day were from labour hire firms, many of which do not have specific training. As a result, they said some were cutting corners and doing less thorough work. A lot of us are getting frustrated with them because they don't do basic stuff properly. Sometimes they just move but don't scan bags, which is necessary because it means we don't know the weight distribution in a plane or if a bag has arrived. I'm going to stop it again because that is very concerning. That is very dangerous, because I would imagine when it comes to flying planes, the weight of what's on board would be somewhat important. Continuing on. They've also been dropping transport transfer bags on arrival carousels, which is the reason why bags aren't making it onto flights with passengers, they said. The worker said staff attrition was becoming a bigger problem as the airport environment became busier and more demanding, and said many of those who joined Swissport when they did, as well as subsequent months, had left for jobs either in different industries as well as other airlines and aviation businesses at Sydney Airport that pay more than Swissport does. They said that while staff were not complaining about the temporary $50 a day bonus for turning up to work, they were still frustrated at conditions. Swissport is offering anything except permanent wage increases. I'm going to stop it again there because, a bonus of $50 a day, how would you keep that temporary? How will that go down when you decide to remove that? Do you really think people are going to stick around and get paid $50 less for doing the same work? It doesn't make sense, does it? Alright, continuing on. Additionally, in jobs Swissports is advertising in cities such as Brisbane, the company is stipulating new employees spend their first month at Sydney Airport, billed as a great opportunity to experience Sydney, where it is also paying for their hotel accommodation. At a recent jobs fair at Sydney Airport, Swissport was hiring part-time contracts but offering full-time hours under these contracts at $23.41 an hour. The workers said recent coverage of Qantas' big spend on new ultra-long-haul craft for direct flights to Europe have angered tired workers, and Swissport employees were increasingly talking about union organising. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see Alan Joyce on TVs where we work showing off these shiny new flights. Just to add one more point, I don't know if you'd want to fly to the other side of the world to then find that your luggage wasn't even on the flight with you. So if I was Qantas, I would probably focus on looking after people's luggage, get that covered before I worry about long-haul flights. Moving on, the worker also raised concerns that during a busy shift recently, when a colleague injured themselves, both the supervisor and manager were busy helping out with other activities, and with no on-site health and safety representative, there was no one to report the injury to. I would tell everyone, don't check in bags when you fly with Qantas right now, or even better, if you can avoid it, don't fly Qantas at all, the worker said. Staff shortages and attrition was an increasing problem for ground handler providers and the airlines that rely on them. One industry source told Guardian Australia that in recent weeks, one company started 20 new employees at 9 a.m. on a Monday at one Australian airport. By 4 p.m. that day, 8 of them had quit. By the Friday of that week, just 7 of the 20 employees remained. The young people coming into these roles, they're getting yelled at, they're getting paid poorly, and now they're just saying, you know what, bugger this, I'm going to work in a cafe because I get paid as much or more than I do here and don't have the stress. And those who got sacked during the pandemic are saying they don't want to go back to the industry that shut on them overnight. So we've got a huge void of experience, the source said. Alright, now I've got a couple of comments about third-party baggage handlers because they seem necessary, because if you have different airlines flying to different airports, you can't have your own staff at every single airport, so you'd have to have baggage handlers to tend to every other airline. And so I'd imagine that's what these guys are for, with airlines that are somewhat based at airports having their own baggage handlers. So if Qantas is contracting out the third party ones, are there still other ones to tend to every other airline? Or has this got a knock-on effect where you just are now short baggage handlers throughout? Because I could see that would be the result. Because why would an airline that isn't based at the airport have enough staff when the airline that is based there doesn't seem to have enough staff? Like, baggage handlers don't come with the flight, they come with the airport. And back to the article. The Transport Workers Union has long been critical of Qantas's outsourcing decision, successfully challenging it in the High Court. The TWU's National Secretary Michael Caine said Swissport had no choice but to keep wages low because Qantas's squeeze on contracts is neither sustainable nor safe. It is no surprise that Swissport can't recruit or retain staff. Swissport would rather pay workers an extra $50 a day to show up for work, bring in interstate workers, and outsource to companies like Star Aviation than pay proper wages. A Qantas spokesperson earlier told The Guardian, "Resourcing continues to be a challenge for the entire aviation industry, and its ground handling suppliers had improved significantly since the holiday peak in April. While there's still a lot more to be done to improve our operational performance, the rate of mishandled baggage has improved in recent months," the spokesperson said. A Swissport spokesperson said the company had worked with Qantas to varying degrees for decades because the scale of our operation means that we can deliver a cost-effective service that is safe and reliable. The rapid rebound in travel demand has put pressure on the resourcing across the entire aviation sector, both here in Australia and around the world. And like I said, we're going to get back to how Qantas sacked all these workers and are now having to deal with the courts and the union. And so here's the next article. I want to read parts of it to you. Qantas vows to go to High Court after losing appeal over unlawful baggage handler sacking. And this is from the 4th of May 2022. Qantas will go to the High Court in a last-ditch attempt to avoid paying a mammoth compensation bill to almost 1,700 sacked ground handlers for years of lost work after the airline failed to overturn a ruling that it illegally outsourced the jobs. On Wednesday, the full bench of the federal court dismissed Qantas's appeal of a July 2021 ruling that the airline had acted against protections in the Fair Work Act when it terminated about 1,680 jobs at 10 airports amid the pandemic in November 2020. In the earlier case in the federal court had ruled Qantas's outsourcing of the workers was in part driven by a desire to avoid industrial action. Qantas had claimed that outsourcing was a necessary financial measure that could save it $100 million annually and reduce future spending on ground handling equipment like tugs and baggage loaders. The Transport Workers Union had argued the outsourcing decision was motivated by an anti-union sentiment. Many of those sacked were union members and their bargaining agreement was set to expire in the following month. I'm going to pause it there for a second. Alright, we'll just go by what Qantas has claimed, and that it's a measure to save $100 million annually. So we'll go with that means even when travel gets back to what it was before the pandemic. Now, if you're going to save that much money by outsourcing, what could that mean? That you're going to get less people and they're going to get paid the same? Probably not. You're going to probably need the same amount of workers doing the same work and you're going to pay them less. But either way, we can see by the way things turned out that getting rid of all of your workers with experience and trying to replace them with inexperienced workers has a whole lot of problems. The legal saga has grown in complexity in the months after the 2021 ruling. Qantas appealed it while remedy hearings have also taken place between the airline and the TWU, which brought the initial court challenge over the outsourcing decision. The remedy hearings previously ruled out ordering Qantas to offer the workers their jobs back, in part because of the third-party agreements the airline had since entered into. The TWU appealed this decision, pushing for reinstatement to be reconsidered. The full bench of the federal court also considered this, but it was dismissed in Wednesday's ruling by Justice Morty Bromberg, Daryl Rangier and Robert Bromwich. The legal saga will now return to the remedy hearings where Justice Michael Lee will decide on the compensation for affected workers and financial penalties against Qantas. But Qantas will now ask that the remedy hearings be paused as it is seeking to appeal Wednesday's judgment in the High Court. Today's judgment does not mean Qantas is required to pay compensation or penalties, the airline said in a statement. Qantas has always said the decision to outsource our ground handling function was based on lawful commercial reasons in response to the unprecedented impact of the COVID crisis. Michael Caine, the National Secretary for the TWU, said Wednesday's ruling reaffirmed what was the largest finding by a country mile of illegal sacking and outsourcing in Australian corporate history. He also called Qantas's decision to take the matter to the High Court reprehensible. In the face of 4 federal justices saying that they acted illegally instead of showing contrition, they've said, "No, let's fight our workforce in the High Court," Caine said. Caine would not speculate on what he believed Qantas's compensation bill could be, but he said he wanted the airline to return to the remedy hearings and sit with workers and the union to discuss an appropriate amount of compensation for their loss of wages past and future and compensate them for their pain and suffering. Outside the federal court in Sydney, Graham McKay, a former Qantas ground handler, said he had been forced to sell his house in Sydney and move his family outside the city as he had been unable to find work after his job was terminated. "This is a bittersweet moment. A lot of us have had a lot of losses," McKay said. Alright, and I'll end this article here because I wanted to highlight the impact that this decision has had on the workers that have lost their jobs, especially considering this video started off with us focusing on the impact this decision has had on the workforce and airports in general. Oh, and I want to quickly say that I've chose the articles that I did because I wanted to also highlight how well this union is fighting for its members. And really, by the union trying to fight for people to get their jobs back, they're also trying to fight to improve airports and improve Qantas in general. And so it's a bit disappointing to see that the ruling said that reinstatement isn't an option. So I really hope the workers get their fair share in compensation. Now I got one more article I want to read to you to highlight more issues that has come from this decision to outsource baggage handlers. Okay, here's the last article I want to read to you. Qantas axed 2,000 ground handling jobs partly because of union ties, court rules. And this is from the 30th of July 2021. And to save being repetitive, I'll jump ahead to what I really want to read. Justice Michael Lee said it was difficult to establish the motive behind the outsourcing decision, but he was not convinced the airline was not in some way trying to limit workers taking industrial action. Right, and then we'll skip ahead again. John Gissing, Qantas Group executive, said the TWU has put forward its persecution complex that our decision to save $100 million a year in the middle of a global downturn was really about stopping them from walking off the job at some point in the future. The focus of the TWU's case was on a few documents that made reference to industrial action while ignoring hundreds that don't. Any company acting prudently has to consider all operational risks when making a significant decision, but a reference to the risk of industrial action does not automatically mean that it is the reason for the decision, Gissing said. And I just have to take a moment to have a laugh at what the executive said, how he pretty much confirmed what the union claimed and what the judge ended up ruling. They only focused on the relevant documents. Like, there were a lot of documents there, and this union's just focusing on the part that's about things like industrial action and stuff. Like, with all these documents about why we wanted to fire these people, you're focusing on the reasons that would be illegal under the Fair Work Act. Continuing on with the article, Qantas, which is on track to receive $2 billion in government support during the pandemic, furiously denies separate claims by the Transport Workers Union that recent incidents involving planes being damaged on the tarmac are due to the different training and operation standards of its new baggage handling, ramp work, push-back driving and cabin cleaning services. A survey of workers who lost their jobs found some had ended up working for the airline again on poorer conditions. 3/4 of the workers surveyed had not been able to secure full-time employment since being let go by the airline. One worker surveyed, who contracted COVID while working at Adelaide Airport in May last year, said they had struggled to find new work as a result of long-term COVID health issues. "I had to sell my family home as I wasn't sure I could pay the mortgage, and now the property market has gone up and left me behind. It has left me unsure of my future as I have been a ramp worker for 24 years and it's what I know and what I'm good at," one worker said. Another worker who lost their job but is now back working for Qantas via a third-party labour firm said he and fellow workers are made to feel dirt cheap. The union has pointed to incidents that have occurred since the outsourcing when calling for federal government intervention to investigate the cause of alleged safety breaches. Alright, we'll leave that article here for now because I want to go into these incidents.
Qantas has been accused of putting profits over safety after an aeroplane was damaged on the tarmac. The Transport Workers Union claims the airline's decision to outsource ground crew jobs is to blame.
This is QF 779 shortly after arriving at Perth Airport from Melbourne on Thursday night. The Boeing 737 badly damaged when the brakes failed on a belt loader used to transport luggage and it slammed into the aircraft.
If there had been passengers walking across the tarmac, there could have been fatalities. And the worker was very lucky to get away with minor injuries.
It follows another incident at Sydney Airport last month in which a child's electric wheelchair was damaged when it fell off a baggage belt. The Transport Workers Union blaming the incidents on the airline's decision to hand over 2,500 ground crew jobs to contractors last year.
This is not acceptable. And Qantas has direct responsibility for this incident and for a plethora of other incidents that seem to be occurring since this work was outsourced.
But Qantas has fired back, a spokesperson telling 9 News the TWU knows full well that external ground handlers are no less safe. When this work was done in-house, we had 0.8 aircraft damage events per 1,000 flights compared to 0.4 for outsourced operations.
Alright, I'm glad that this news report quoted the Qantas spokesperson because I find this talking point very interesting. Where do I even start? First of all, what do you mean long term? Is long term close to the same amount of time that you've outsourced these workers? Because I wouldn't be surprised if long term translates to a period of time that's like 5 times longer than how long these outsourced contracts have existed. Nobody's going to believe that you were better off with less staff that are not experienced than you were with a full staff with years of experience. Nobody's going to believe that. You are talking out of your ass. And I wanted to stop and take a moment to talk about this because I think it really highlights the kind of us versus them attitude that Qantas has against their former workers that were part of the union. And it's a bit childish and ridiculous because Qantas might think that they're shitting on the former workers, but you're just shitting on yourself. It's like saying, oh, if you think we operate pretty bad now, you should have seen before. Yeah, we really were quite shit as a company. Like, that's just a self-own if that's what you want to make your argument. And that's if we pretend it made sense. And then the other interesting fact, right, and this is in May 2021, they say they don't have many incidents like this, and then it happens again in the next couple of days. Qantas has fired back at claims from the Transport Workers Union after a baggage vehicle damaged a plane for the second time in days. And here is another report, the airline that flew a damaged aircraft. And as you can see, it's from June 17th, 2021, a year ago. A Qantas plane flying between 2 Australian cities was damaged on the ground before taking to the sky. The plane was loaded with passengers and was flying from Darwin to Brisbane in the country's north. And here's a Channel 9 report about another incident.
A serious airline safety breach has grounded a Qantas Dreamliner with a baggage trailer smashing into the plane on the tarmac. Reid Butler joins me with the exclusive details from Melbourne Airport. Reid, passengers were on board.
Yes, Pete, they had to disembark and board another plane. The damaged Dreamliner is tonight in for repairs behind me. It can't fly and it has been removed from the fleet indefinitely. Qantas is investigating exactly what happened, but 9 News has been told by multiple insiders this frightening accident came about as a result of staff shortages and staff exhaustion. A brand new Qantas Dreamliner out of action after a baggage trailer came loose on the tarmac and slammed into the 787's engine. Close to 200 passengers on board. The incident happened on Saturday, the busiest weekend at Melbourne Airport since the pandemic started. Despite the huge rush, the Transport Workers Union says there wasn't enough baggage workers to meet demand.
It's not ideal. We've got a Premier aircraft now that's been grounded. And, you know, we've got a pretty serious OH&S risk that the workers have been exposed to, as well as the passengers.
Qantas axed 2,000 ground staff last year, outsourcing baggage handling to a company called Swissport.
They made a decision to make their existing and their experienced staff unemployed and outsourced to casualised and inexperienced labour. and these are the effects that you're going to get.
Qantas disagrees, telling Nine News in a statement, "We reject the union's claims about the safety record of these ground handlers or that this is due to outsourcing." The TWU didn't have the same level of concern about ground handling aircraft damage incidents before this work was outsourced.
So a year goes by and the Qantas spokesperson has gone from the incidents were double long term with the in-house crew to the TWU didn't have the same level of concern about ground handling aircraft damage incidents before this work was outsourced. Oh yeah, oh, you got them. So a little bit of time and a few planes with gaping holes in them and vehicles used to move luggage around still being driven into planes. To change up the talking point a bit, still childish, still a self-own in a way. Because if you had incidents with trained staff with lots of experience, then why would you think outsourcing was a good idea?
No one was hurt when the wayward baggage trailer hit the Dreamliner, and Qantas claims the accident did little to contribute to delays. The airlines consistently pointed the finger at inexperienced travellers.
I think it's a bit rich for the Qantas CEO to come out and blame the passengers for not being match fit. Again, this is on Qantas.
So the CEO of Qantas is blaming the passengers, blaming inexperienced flyers. Really? Add that to the list of fuck yous from Qantas to their customers, along with having your luggage lost. And this, because Australia's consumer watchdog says the airline did not communicate clearly to passengers that they were entitled to a refund because of the COVID-19 crisis. And I feel like this is a good time to remind everybody about how he was having a cry when premiers decided to keep their borders closed when there was real bad COVID outbreaks in particular states.
Qantas is pushing state governments to reopen their borders. I'm at Qantas's Sydney domestic terminal, normally its busiest in the country. And as you can see, the pictures tell the story.
This situation where there are a large number of states and territories that have had zero cases and they're not even open to each other.
Qantas boss saving his harshest words for Queensland.
It's just there to inform maybe the politics, and we think that eventually will cause jobs and businesses, particularly a lot of small businesses in Queensland.
This was after getting rid of 6,000 jobs in his own company. Oh yeah, and getting rid of 6,000 staff and then pushing for more business sounds like a winning plan. Oh yeah, and let's hear him explain why 6,000 Qantas jobs have been cut.
Federal government has JobKeeper in place until the end of September. Why can't you keep these 6,000 workers on until then and just stay in a holding pattern?
Well, we think, and we've been talking to our staff each week for the last few months, and one of the clear things that's coming out is people want certainty being brought to what's going to happen into the future. And we spent the last few weeks working about what demand's going to look like, what the airline's going to look like. And every airline in the world has done this. Some airlines have said they're going to have to cut their employees by 50%, 30%. And we feel a lot of these jobs, these 6,000 jobs, will not come back.
Won't come back because you outsourced them. That would be the only reason.
Qantas has received hundreds of millions of dollars in government support during this crisis, ranging from JobKeeper to subsidies for international and domestic routes. The government's partly given that money to try to avoid a scenario like the job losses today. What do you say to viewers who might be thinking, you keep talking about certainty, but the best certainty you can give people is a continuing job in this environment?
But I think everybody would agree if the jobs are not really there, that the market has shrunk, air transportation has shrunk, every airline in the world is shrinking. Qantas is not shrinking by as much as them. We're reducing our size by 20%. We've, because of the domestic market, have been relatively less impacted because of the strength we have that we built up over the last few years, because of the two brands that we have, because of the loyalty program we have. So our job losses are a lot less. But I think the government aid that we have gotten, just to be clear on it, the vast majority of that has been JobKeeper, over 400 million, which has been passed on to our employees. That's not kept by the company. And the other benefits that the company have given us are flying a minimal network to keep Australia connected. And that's to cover the fuel costs, to cover the wages of the pilots on it. And the company's not making money out of that. And that's for the national interest. So the money the government has been giving us has been really been given to employees or keeping a public service going and hasn't been given to the company.
Alan Joyce, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Lee.
I think the way he talks about JobKeeper and Qantas employees is very telling. He doesn't see the workers as part of the company, saying that, nah, the company didn't get JobKeeper, it went to the employees. You know shit. That was the whole idea. And obviously, it didn't come with the same shit that JobSeeker came with, like robo-debt, didn't have to pay it back if you got too much or anything. And mutual obligations didn't seem like you actually had to keep any of those jobs, considering Qantas got $400 million of it and still turned around and outsourced very vital jobs. Speaking of JobKeeper, this is probably worth a quick mention. In 2020, in September, Qantas had to go through the courts and they were ordered to pay back millions after the court ruled that they shortchanged their staff on JobKeeper. But then in December, a couple months later, there was another ruling saying that they didn't and they don't have to pay people back. And so Qantas seemed to have got away with that one. But then there's these court cases, the ones that we've been talking about for most of this video, and it makes you question, was it worth it? And what was their reasoning for why they had to outsource these jobs? $100 million annually. Is that worth all the time in court? Was it worth all the damage to the planes and the cancellations that would have led to? All the damage to the company's reputation? All for what? What was it? $100 million annually? Wait a second.
And we have to be honest with this 6,000 people. Those jobs are not going to come back. The rest of the airline industry is saying the same thing to their people. And we need to give them the redundancy money. Our redundancy money is a lot more attractive than the award. We're going to be having to pay over $600 million in redundancies to these people. They'll get that money and they can go on and find jobs. That's a lot better than standing them down for years with no prospect of those jobs coming back. We have to be honest, and the union should be thanking us for doing the right thing by the people, to making sure that we communicate, give them the truth and let them get on and find real jobs that will occur and will come back.
So after 6 years of savings, that will make up for that redundancy payment. And like I was just saying, even if it was a real $100 million annually in savings, that probably wouldn't last long if you continuously had planes you had to repair and flights cancelled. But it really just seems like they would have done anything just to get rid of the workers that are in a union, because it didn't look like a good financial move. And in regards to how the company operates and how the business serves the people, doesn't seem like a good move there, getting rid of all your experienced workers and replacing them with inexperienced labour. Turns out there's problems with that, especially in an industry like aviation. So basically, even though this video is really long, it probably can just be summed up with this.
Qantas has announced major cuts that will see 6,000 people lose their jobs.
There wasn't enough baggage workers to meet demand.
So what else could be the motivation other than using the pandemic as an opportunity for some union busting? Well, when we look back at Qantas through the years, we can see that Alan Joyce has done this before, and perhaps he was wanting a similar result, because when we look back at 2014, we can see that Qantas axed 5,000 jobs, and as we remember, there was no pandemic in 2014. 100 of those jobs were pilots. And then as we can see in 2015, the CEO got $11 million. And then by 2017, he was on $25 million. So this got me curious, and I wanted to know how many jobs Qantas had. And I thought a good place to start would be 2008, the year that Alan Joyce started as CEO. And so I downloaded all of their annual reports for each year, looking through every one for the amount of staff that Qantas had, and now let's have a look at what I found. Alright, 2008, it was very easy to find because it was in a huge font, pretty much had a page of its own. Qantas is one of the country's largest employers with more than 90% of its 37,000 employees based in Australia. And then on to 2009. Great people. The success of the Qantas Group is underpinned by our 35,000 plus employees. The future of the Qantas Group is about great people who are skilled, motivated and supported to do great things. And then on to 2010. Great people. The Qantas Group employs 35,700 people across 250 unique roles, with 93% of them based in Australia. Our goal is to deliver a great place to work, provide training and development for our people, and harness their passion in support of our brands. 2011, the group employs almost 36,000 people, 92% of them based in Australia. 2012, broadening our horizons, building on unique Australian qualities and the skills of its 33,600 people, the Qantas Group is broadening its horizons to secure a successful and profitable future. 2013, as we transform our business and deliver our strategy, we are investing in our 30,000 plus people through training and new technology. And then on to 2014, where I couldn't actually find it, which I find interesting considering this was around the same time we had headlines like this about axing 5,000 jobs, and I couldn't find it for 2015 or 16. And I would just like to note that the examples that I'm presenting, especially from here on out, may not be the total of employees they have, but it's pretty much the only number I could find that gives us an idea of how many employees Qantas has. Like this here for 2017, the group-wide policy of implementing an 18-month wage freeze has helped to offset inflation, build a more competitive and sustainable wage position going forward, and closes the gap to our major domestic competitors. 41 agreements have been closed, with the wage freeze covering nearly 23,000 employees. So the only time I could find a number of employees was when they were talking about wage freezes in this annual report. On to 2018. We've also been in a position to award our people with $67 million set aside to recognise the contribution of our 27,000 non-executive employees towards the 2018 financial year result. And I should note that these bonuses were the reward for participating in the wage freeze. 2019, we know people are critical to our success, and we're pleased to provide 25,000 of our employees with a total of $32 million in staff travel bonuses. On to 2020. Sadly, at least 6,000 Qantas Group employees will lose their jobs as a result of this crisis. And then on to 2021, delivering those services rely on our 22,000 people. They are critical to our success and have been through so much in the past 18 months. We look forward to welcoming them back to work as Australia and the world reopen. So in the time that Alan Joyce has been CEO of Qantas, they've gone from having 37,000 staff
to 22,000 people.
And obviously, while I was there, I thought I'd have a look at how much the executives made, especially Alan Joyce, because we all sort of suspected that he was getting paid more as Qantas was shredding workers. And it does indeed seem that as Qantas had less workers, the CEO got paid more. If we ever look at it, even without the share price growth, that is still an insane amount of money. $10 million, and he's probably never loaded a single piece of luggage onto a single flight. You know what I'm saying? And so this video is for anyone that might have to have gone to an airport and see how chaotic it is, or seen this headline and wondered, why did Qantas Chief Executive Alan Joyce's $19 million Sydney mansion get hit with eggs and toilet paper? We can't say for sure what the person's motive was, but we can certainly say it's not a surprise after everything we've learned. Thanks for watching.